The silence of space was broken by the hum of humanity's first encounter with the unknown. The Zorith fleet emerged from the darkness like shadows in the night, silent, ominous, and massive. No one on Earth had seen anything like it before, and no one knew how to react. Their ships were incomprehensible in design, enormous, angular, and metallic, with strange, pulsating lights that gave them an eerie glow. As they neared Earth, the first message came through, not in words, but in a deep, guttural transmission that shook the very atmosphere. "We are the Zorith. Your world is ours." On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. Governments scrambled, military forces assembled, and scientific communities rushed to decode any scrap of the alien transmission. The UN convened in an emergency session, and every leader knew the stakes were life or death. Earth had never been faced with an enemy like this. The Zorith were not just a species. They were an entire force, powerful and ruthless, and they didn't seem interested in talking. General Sarah Blackwell, commander of the United Earth Forces, sat at the head of a large conference table in the underground command center, a room buried beneath layers of concrete and steel. The room buzzed with activity as data streamed across multiple holographic screens. The news was grim. Zorith warships were appearing in Earth's orbit, and Earth's military wasn't even close to matching their advanced technology. "I'm telling you, this isn't just an invasion," Blackwell said, her voice sharp as steel. "This is an extermination. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to dominate." Her expression was cold, unreadable, yet the weight of the situation bore down on her like a crushing force. She had seen combat in nearly every corner of the world, but nothing could have prepared her for this. Dr. Lucas Chun, a leading scientist in extraterrestrial technology, adjusted his glasses, his mind racing. "We need more data. If we can understand their technology, maybe we can find a way to fight back." He wasn't convinced that Earth was entirely powerless, but the Zorith had sent a clear message. They were far beyond humanity's capabilities. Ambassador Derek Stone, who had been tasked with the diplomatic side of the crisis, stood at the back of the room, arms crossed. He was a tall man, his military background evident in his posture, but it was his diplomatic skills that had earned him a place in this high-stakes room. "We should attempt communication. If we can talk to them, understand them, it might buy us time. Maybe they'll listen." Blackwell scoffed, her fingers drumming on the table. "Listen? They're here to conquer us, not negotiate. And time is something we don't have." The UN Secretary-General, Elizabeth Patel, watched the exchange silently. "We don't know what they want. We don't even know if they see us as a threat." Blackwell leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Trust me, if they didn't see us as a threat, they wouldn't be here. Earth is a resource-rich planet. I think they've already decided it's theirs for the taking." The conversation stalled as the room went quiet. The threat from space was not just distant, it was already here. Hours later, as the world held its breath, a new transmission came through. This one was not merely a message, but a declaration. The voice that spoke was as cold and emotionless as the stars themselves. "Your species has been marked for extermination. Do not resist. Your world will be assimilated." A terrifying silence followed. The words hung in the air, like the weight of an executioner's sentence. Stone's face went pale, but he kept his composure. This was the moment that would define humanity's future. "We need to do something," Blackwell said, her voice low and steady. "We can't just sit here and wait to die." And with that, the decision was made. It was time for Earth to show the Zorith that humanity would not go down without a fight. Meanwhile, across the globe, humanity's first taste of the alien presence was more immediate. Massive ships entered Earth's atmosphere with terrifying speed. One of the smaller craft fired on a satellite, and just like that, an entire communications network went dark. The attack was swift, coordinated, and overwhelmingly powerful. The Zorith had not come to simply intimidate. They came to cripple Earth's ability to respond. General Blackwell's forces were already mobilizing, but even they knew they were outmatched. With only conventional weaponry and limited knowledge of the alien ships, Earth's military forces were in the dark. Blackwell ordered a full evacuation of key cities, preparing for the worst. As the Zorth forces made their way across the globe, their ships began landing in the oceans, along coastlines, and in remote areas. Each landing zone was highly strategic, as if the Zorth knew exactly where to hit. The first major strike occurred in the Pacific, where an enormous Zorth warship landed just off the coast of California. It unleashed a wave of energy, taking out a dozen military installations in an instant. Yet, amidst the chaos, humanity began to rally. While the world was reeling, Earth's scientific community worked around the clock to decipher the alien technology they had already begun to recover. Dr. Chen and his team were among the first to make any headway. A preliminary scan of the Zorth ship revealed a system of energy shields far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. "This is unlike anything we've ever encountered," Dr. Chen said, examining the data. "They're using some form of energy manipulation that defies all known laws of physics." Despite the bleak prospects, a spark of hope ignited. If humanity could reverse engineer even a fraction of the alien technology, they might stand a chance. Back at the command center, Blackwell stared out the window at the night sky. It was no longer a peaceful expanse of stars. It was now a battleground. Ships loomed ominously overhead, and it seemed as if the Zorth were preparing for the final assault. "Blackwell, you need to hear this," a voice interrupted her thoughts. The officer speaking was one of the communications experts. "It's a message from the Zorth." Reluctantly, Blackwell stepped over to the console. The transmission was brief, but its message was chilling. "We have arrived. Resistance is futile. Surrender or be destroyed." Stone's expression darkened. "They're making it clear they want no negotiations. We need to prepare for the worst." The mood in the room shifted. Everyone knew that humanity's only hope was to strike first, to make a stand against an enemy that seemed invincible. The Zorth had underestimated one thing: the resilience of humanity. It wasn't just about the technology or firepower. It was about survival. The same instinct that had propelled humans from caves to cities, from Earth to the stars, was the same drive that would fuel their fight now. Blackwell looked at her officers, then at Stone, and then back to the holographic map that displayed the locations of the Zorth ships. "We fight back. We show them exactly what humanity is capable of." As the first attacks launched against the Zorth ships, it became clear that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology, but in their resourcefulness and adaptability. Earth's military, knowing they were outclassed, relied on guerrilla tactics, hitting fast, hitting hard, and retreating before the Zorth could retaliate. It wasn't enough to defeat the aliens outright, but it was enough to slow them down. "Humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology, it's our unpredictability," Blackwell said, her voice steady as she watched the first strike unfold on the screen. "And they haven't seen anything yet." But as the battle raged on, the Zorth were beginning to learn. Their shields were practically impervious to Earth's conventional weapons, and their superior firepower made it seem like humanity was already losing. It was clear that Earth's greatest weapon wouldn't be found in a laboratory or a weapons cache. It would come from the one thing the Zorth couldn't understand: human tenacity. The Zorth may have underestimated humanity's ingenuity, but Blackwell knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The fight had only just begun. The clock was ticking, and Earth's future hung in the balance. The chaos that had erupted across the globe in the aftermath of the Zorth's arrival had slowly begun to stabilize, but the tension was palpable. Earth's governments, now united by necessity, were working around the clock to formulate a coherent strategy. As the Zorth's forces continued to advance, Earth's military faced a harrowing reality: they were massively outgunned. But as General Sarah Blackwell had reminded her commanders, humanity was not without its strengths. It was time to fight back, not by matching the Zorth's technology, but by using what humanity did best: thinking outside the box. General Blackwell stood at the front of a hastily convened strategy session, the dark circles under her eyes betraying the sleepless nights spent planning Earth's resistance. The conference room was filled with military commanders and strategic advisors. The walls were lined with holographic projections of the global battlefield, showing the Zoratha's advancing positions. "We're losing ground," Blackwell began, her voice grim but resolute. "The Zorath have destroyed communication satellites, taken out key military installations, and demonstrated capabilities we couldn't have anticipated. But we've also managed to slow them down. The question is, how do we turn the tide?" Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Cole, Blackwell's second-in-command, stepped forward. His tactical mind had been a key asset in Earth's early resistance. "We've already seen that brute force isn't going to work. We can't match them head-on. But we do know this. They rely on their superior technology, and they're not used to facing an unpredictable enemy. What if we don't fight them the way they expect?" Blackwell raised an eyebrow, signaling Cole to continue. He gestured to the holographic map of the Zorath fleet's movements. "We've been tracking their movements, and there's a pattern. They attack the major cities first, then concentrate on crippling our military infrastructure. But there's an obvious blind spot. These ships have a central command node, and it's vulnerable." Dr. Lucas Chen, the scientist who had been working tirelessly to decode Zorath technology, interjected. "They rely heavily on their central command for coordination. If we could take that down, it could cause significant disarray within their fleet. It's risky, but it's the only way to really disrupt their operations." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "That's a good idea. But we need more than just theory. We need a way to make it happen." Cole smiled grimly. "We've already got that. We've been retrofitting older weapons, military technology that was decommissioned years ago, into guerrilla warfare systems. Simple, low-tech, and hard for the Zorath to track. We hit them where it hurts, then vanish before they can retaliate."
Dr. Chen nodded.
"And if we use the alien technology we've already salvaged, we could upgrade some of our existing systems. I've been working on a reverse engineering process. It's not perfect, but I think we can adapt it to our needs." There was a long pause as Blackwell absorbed the proposal. The odds were still stacked against them, but the military knew one thing for certain. They could not afford to wait any longer. "All right," Blackwell said finally, her voice resolute. "We're going to hit them hard. Guerrilla strikes, tech sabotage, and hit-and-run tactics. We'll start by taking out their secondary assets. If we can disrupt their communications and supply lines, we'll have a shot at hitting that command center." As Earth's forces geared up for the first phase of their resistance, the Zorath were becoming increasingly frustrated. The initial shock of their overwhelming strength had worn off, and their strategy of rapid destruction was starting to falter. Human forces, though outnumbered and outgunned, were adapting, using unconventional methods to stay one step ahead. The Zoratha's response was swift. Admiral Zar, commander of the Zorath fleet, was no longer confident in the easy conquest of Earth. "These creatures are unpredictable," Zar growled, pacing before the holographic map of Earth. "They fight like cornered animals. They do not conform to our expectations. It is time to escalate the strategy." Zara's fingers danced across the control panel, calling up the coordinates of Earth's most heavily defended military bases. "Prepare the bombardment ships. We will make an example of their cities. If they will not bow, they will burn." The first phase of Earth's counteroffensive began quietly, almost imperceptibly. In the dead of night, the first human strike force infiltrated a Zorath communication relay station hidden in the Pacific. Using improvised EMP devices scavenged from the wreckage of previous battles, the team disabled the Zoratha's communications grid, causing a temporary blackout. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Back in the command center, Blackwell watched the results with a grim satisfaction. "It's a start, but we need to keep them off balance. The Zorath have underestimated us. They think we're primitive, that we don't know how to fight. But that's exactly where we have the advantage." Ambassador Derek Stone, who had been struggling with his role as a diplomat during the crisis, found himself increasingly pulled into military strategy sessions. His role in the beginning had been to ensure communication with the Zorath, to find a peaceful resolution, but after the Zorath's demand for humanity's subjugation, Stone's diplomatic approach had shifted. He had become a vocal proponent of the fight-back strategy. "I agree with General Blackwell," Stone said at one of the strategy meetings. The Zorth see us as weak and fractured. But if we can show them we're capable of mounting a sustained resistance, we can shift the power dynamic. We need to keep their fleet off guard. Dr. Chen, who had been working late into the nights, piped up. We've made progress on reverse engineering their shields. The challenge is figuring out how to breach them without triggering their self-repair mechanisms. It's a race against time. But as the days wore on, it became evident that the battle was far from simple. The Zorth were relentless in their pursuit of Earth's capitulation. Their forces were powerful, and each new offensive seemed to deliver a devastating blow to Earth's resistance. Yet humanity was not without its resolve. The Zorth fleet may have been a symbol of sheer destructive force, but Earth's people fought with something that the aliens could not fathom: determination. In a remote desert base, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Cole and his squadron of elite soldiers prepared for their next mission, infiltrating a Zorth storage facility that was known to house critical materials for their fleet's next offensive. The mission was a suicide run. There was no guarantee of return, but Cole knew the importance of this strike. "This is it, folks," Cole said, his voice low but steady. "We don't know how much time we have, but if we don't hit them here, we might not have another chance." The squadron mounted their transport vehicles, cloaked in Earth-made tech that had been enhanced with alien materials. As they approached the Zorth facility under cover of night, they could see the massive ships hovering in the sky, their engines pulsing with ominous energy. "Stay sharp," Cole commanded. "We're in and out. Get the intel, plant the charges, and get to the extraction point. No heroics." The soldiers moved like shadows, their movements swift and coordinated. They made their way through the facility, bypassing Zorth guards with a mix of stealth and sabotage. Cole's heart raced, but his focus never wavered. Time was critical. When they reached the heart of the facility, the team planted explosives on the critical infrastructure, an energy converter that supplied power to the Zorth fleet. With a silent countdown, they moved back to the extraction point. But just as they were about to reach safety, an alarm blared. "Go!
Go!
Go!" Cole shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The Zorth had found them. Back at Earth's command center, Blackwell's eyes narrowed as she watched the situation unfold on the screens. Cole's team was in trouble, and the Zorth were closing in. But Blackwell knew one thing. Humanity's strength was not just in their ability to fight back, it was in their ability to surprise, to adapt, and to never give up. The charge detonated just as Cole and his team made their escape, sending a shockwave through the facility and disabling a key component of the Zorth's war machine. The Zorth were stunned, disoriented. Blackwell let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice resolute. "Let's show them what humanity can really do." As Earth's resistance continued to grow, so too did the Zorth's frustration. But the war was far from over. The real fight was only just beginning, and Blackwell and her team knew they had only one option: keep fighting or lose everything. In the weeks following Earth's initial strikes against the Zorth, the war had taken on an unpredictable rhythm. Humanity's small victories, though hard-won, had begun to chip away at the Zorth's sense of invincibility. The Zorth, confident in their technological superiority, had assumed that the planet's population would collapse in the face of their overwhelming might. But humanity had proved them wrong, again and again. Each guerrilla strike, each small-scale sabotage operation, had thrown a wrench into the Zorth's gears. And now, Earth's leaders realized that the time had come to escalate the conflict, no longer just resisting, but truly fighting back. General Sarah Blackwell sat alone in the command center, her eyes fixed on the digital display of Earth's battlefront. The war had reached a boiling point. The Zorth were everywhere, hovering above cities, patrolling military installations, and reinforcing their positions. Despite their technological advantage, they seemed to be growing increasingly frustrated. Humanity had managed to delay their progress, but the alien fleet still loomed above Earth's skies like a dark, menacing cloud. "Status report," Blackwell commanded, her tone firm but tired. She hadn't slept properly in days, her mind constantly running through tactical plans and contingency strategies. "Nam, "We've received reports from the front line," Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Cole said as he stepped into the room. "We've lost several key bases in the Pacific and Europe. However, the guerrilla attacks have started to have a noticeable impact. The Zorith are still taking casualties from our surprise tactics, and their fleet seems to be slowing down, though they're now in a state of heightened alert." Dr. Lucas Chen, who had been working with a team of scientists to reverse engineer Zorith technology, looked up from his console. "We've identified a weak point in their energy system. It's not fully understood yet, but there's a vulnerability in their power grid. If we can exploit that, we may be able to disrupt their operations for a significant period." Blackwell raised an eyebrow. "Disrupt their fleet?
How?"
Chun hesitated for a moment before replying. "Their fleet is powered by a quantum energy source, something far beyond what we've seen on Earth. It's unstable, and if the Zoritha's main power plant is damaged or overloaded, it could create a chain reaction. I've been working on a plan to target their quantum reactors directly." Cole folded his arms, his brow furrowed. "That's a hell of a gamble, document. We hit them too hard, and we risk triggering a full-scale meltdown. But if it works, it could buy us the time we need to really hit them where it hurts." Blackwell finished his thought. She turned to the gathered officers. "We'll need to coordinate every resource we have for this. A successful strike on their main reactor could disable their fleet long enough for us to take the initiative. We'll need to hit them fast, hit them hard, and get out before they can retaliate." Cole clenched his jaw. "And how do we deal with their reinforcements? They're bound to send more ships to protect their reactors." "We won't have much time," Blackwell acknowledged. "But we can't afford to hesitate. This is our best shot." The plan was set into motion almost immediately. Earth's forces scrambled to put together a specialized strike team, drawing from military units and elite soldiers who had shown the most ingenuity and adaptability in previous missions. The goal was simple: infiltrate a Zorith energy facility hidden in the mountains of Siberia, destroy the power core, and escape before the Zorith could regroup. The mission was dangerous, a suicide mission for all intents and purposes, but humanity's back was to the wall. They had no other choice. Lieutenant Colonel Cole was chosen to lead the assault. With his team in tow, he began preparing for what would be one of the most perilous missions Earth had ever undertaken. The small, elite group would infiltrate the facility by using cloaking technology reverse-engineered from Zorith wreckage, then plant explosives on the quantum reactor. "I know the risks," Cole said as he briefed his team. "But we have one advantage they don't. We're unpredictable. They expect us to crumble. We're going to prove them wrong." As the operation began, a sense of urgency filled the air. Cole's team, outfitted in modified Zorith stealth suits, moved swiftly and silently through the snow-covered Russian landscape, avoiding Zorith patrols. The energy facility was buried deep beneath the mountains, heavily guarded and surrounded by automated defense systems. The facility itself was an eerie, sterile complex, its towering structures emitting faint blue pulses of energy as they powered the alien fleet. The team entered the facility, making their way toward the core with precision. Cole led the charge, his face set in grim determination. They encountered minimal resistance at first. Zorith forces were still focused on Earth's larger population centers. "I've located the main reactor," Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "It's massive. I'll need several minutes to interface with the system and set the detonators. We can't afford any mistakes." "Understood," Cole replied, his voice sharp. "We'll cover you." The team split into two groups, one to safeguard Dr. Chen while he worked, and the other to scout for any approaching reinforcements. Cole knew the Zorith would be scrambling to track their movements, but with their cloaking devices in place, they moved like shadows through the facility. But just as Dr. Chen began to interface with the reactor, an alarm blared, a siren that echoed throughout the complex. The Zorith had detected their presence. A voice crackled over the facility's intercoms, harsh and guttural. "Intruders detected. Initiate lockdown." "We've been compromised," one of Cole's soldiers shouted as automated weapons began to descend from the ceiling, targeting their position. "Get to the reactor.
Now."
Cole grabbed his weapon, signaling for his team to move quickly. "Form up. We don't have much time." The situation quickly devolved into chaos. Zorth soldiers poured into the room, their energy weapons crackling with lethal power. The humans were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of surprise. Earth's soldiers fought with raw determination, using every ounce of their training to stay alive. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought for their world, their families, their way of life. Dr. Chen worked furiously, typing commands into the reactor's console. "I'm almost there," he shouted over the gunfire. "Just need a few more seconds." Cole and his team fought back to back, holding off the Zorth soldiers with everything they had. It was a desperate struggle, but there was no turning back now. The reactor's countdown had already begun, and the odds were against them. 10 seconds. Dr. Chen called out. Cole's heart raced. "Move, move, move." With a deafening roar, the quantum reactor exploded. A brilliant flash of light consumed the facility, sending shockwaves that reverberated across the mountain. The Zorth energy source had been overloaded, and the resulting explosion crippled their fleet's power core. The strike had been a success, but at a steep cost. The facility had been obliterated, and as the dust cleared, only a few of Cole's team remained standing. The Zorth would know that this wasn't just another skirmish. This was a declaration of war. As the survivors made their way out of the facility, a sense of victory mingled with the bitter knowledge of the lives lost. They had crippled the Zorth's primary power supply, but the war was far from over. The Zorth would retaliate. Of that, there was no doubt. Back at Earth's command center, Blackwell watched the live feed of the explosion from the safety of her operations hub. The blast had been visible from orbit, a blazing flare of light in the night sky. For a moment, she allowed herself a brief smile. Humanity had just delivered a blow that would be felt across the stars. But the war was far from won. "The Zorth are reeling," she said quietly to her officers. "They will retaliate, but we've shown them something they never expected. We have the ability to strike back." Cole's voice crackled over the comms. "Mission complete, General. The reactor is down. We've made our mark." Blackwell nodded, her voice steady. "We'll keep fighting. And this time, we'll do it on our terms." The tides of war had begun to shift. Humanity had just landed its first real blow against the Zorth, and the consequences of that strike would echo across the stars. The Zorth may have underestimated humanity's resilience, but they would soon realize that their conquest of Earth would not come easily. The destruction of the Zorth's primary quantum reactor had sent shockwaves through both the alien fleet and the human resistance. Earth's first major victory had disrupted the Zorth's overwhelming superiority, but it had also provoked an even more dangerous retaliation. The Zorth were not used to losing, and their response would be swift and brutal. Earth's leaders knew that the time for subtlety and small strikes was over. The final battle was approaching, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever. General Sarah Blackwell stood before a holographic projection of Earth, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The once intimidating Zorth fleet had begun to falter in the wake of their recent losses, their ships slowing and reconfiguring as they scrambled to recover. The damage to their power grid had severely crippled their ability to maintain control over their fleet, but the aliens were not going to give up easily. "We've managed to slow them down, but they're coming," Blackwell said, her voice calm but filled with a steely resolve. "They've regrouped, and now they're consolidating their forces. We've made them bleed, but now they're angrier. They'll be ready to launch a full assault any day now." Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Cole, still recovering from the wounds sustained during the mission in Siberia, stood beside her, his expression hard. "We've shown them that we can hurt them. We've taken out one of their reactors and crippled their supply lines, but they've got the firepower to wipe us off the map. We need more than just guerrilla tactics now." Blackwell nodded. She had seen the reports. The Zorth were mobilizing their remaining ships for a decisive strike, one that could overwhelm Earth's remaining defenses. The plan now was simple: take the fight to them. "We need to give them one final shock," Blackwell said. "We have one shot at this, and we have to make it count. Our goal is to hit their command center, destroy it completely. If we can take out their leadership, we can throw them into disarray." Dr. Lucas Chen, now fully recovered from his near-death experience, piped up. It's risky. The Zorath will have reconfigured their fleets around a more secure command structure. We've had some success exploiting their weaknesses before, but this is their final stand. If we fail, then we die fighting. Cole finished for him, his eyes narrowing. But if we succeed, we might just win this thing. The plan was set. The final battle would take place at the heart of the Zorath fleet. Earth's forces, now bolstered by the remnants of their most elite military units, would launch a combined ground and air assault to infiltrate the Zorath flagship. Blackwell knew the odds were slim, but they had no choice. There could be no retreat, no fallback. It was either victory or extinction. Ambassador Derek Stone, who had spent most of his time negotiating and searching for peaceful solutions, now found himself in an entirely new role. In a war that had become a battle for survival, diplomacy had become secondary to sheer willpower. He had spent days preparing humanity's population for what might be their last stand. "We don't have the luxury of hope anymore," Stone said to a crowd of civilian leaders in a broadcast. "The Zorath won't stop until we're all enslaved or worse. We've tried to communicate, we've tried to reason with them, but they won't listen. The time for talking is over. It's time to fight." His words resonated with the people of Earth. While many still feared the worst, they now saw hope in the unexpected resilience of humanity. Across the world, civilians were gearing up to support the military in whatever way they could, whether through providing resources, intelligence, or simply morale. As Earth's final assault began to take shape, tensions ran high. The battlefield was no longer just a military conflict. It had become a symbol of survival for humanity. Everyone, from the top brass to the lowest-ranking soldiers, knew that this was it. There would be no second chances. The Zorath flagship, a colossal, heavily armored ship, loomed ominously in the blackness of space, surrounded by smaller ships and defensive arrays. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, an alien fortress capable of decimating entire fleets with a single strike. And yet, despite its imposing size and power, Blackwell and her forces had a secret weapon: human ingenuity. As Earth's fleet assembled at a distant staging area, readying for the assault, Colonel Cole led the charge on the ground. His team, along with special forces units from around the world, would be the vanguard in an attack to cripple the flagship's defenses. They had infiltrated smaller Zorath vessels before, but this would be a whole different level of risk. "We hit them fast and hard," Cole said, his voice unwavering despite the enormity of their mission. "No time for second thoughts. We're going in through the outer ring of defenses, clear a path, and plant charges directly on the flagship's core. If we make it out alive, we'll be gods. If not, well, at least we'll go out fighting." The attack began with a sudden flare of engines, and Earth's forces launched toward the heart of the Zorath fleet. In a desperate attempt to avoid detection, the human ships used every scrap of alien technology at their disposal to mask their presence. The Zorath had grown more vigilant, but humanity's resourcefulness had always been its greatest weapon. Dr. Chun, now working from the command ship, had patched into the flagship systems, providing invaluable intel to Earth's forces. "They've got multiple defense layers surrounding the flagship," he warned, his voice tense. "We'll have to disable them one at a time, or we won't even make it past their perimeter." Cole's unit launched in a series of precisely timed jumps, using Zorath-based cloaking technology to infiltrate the flagship's outer hull. As they entered, the halls were dark, the sound of their footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. Every corner was a potential ambush. Every shadow could hide a Zorath soldier. "Stay alert," Cole whispered. "We're too close to fail now." The tension on the bridge of the command ship was palpable as Earth's forces continued to engage the Zorath. General Blackwell, overseeing the operation from orbit, couldn't afford to blink. This was their moment. They had invested everything into this final assault, and now it was up to Cole and his team on the ground to complete the mission. "Direct hit on their communications array," one of the officers reported. "The flagship is in a full communication blackout. We've got the opening we need." "Good," Blackwell said, her voice hard. "Now hit them with everything we've got." Inside the flagship, the human soldiers fought their way deeper into the heart of the vessel. They were no longer fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of humanity. "We've reached the core," Cole said over the comms, panting as he and his team made their way to the central chamber. "Place the charges, and let's get out of here." Just as they planted the final charges, a Zorath counterattack came in full force. A massive explosion rocked the flagship, and the team had to fight their way out, retreating through fire and debris. The Zorath were on high alert now, and every step felt like a countdown to certain death. But they held their ground. Every soldier, every Marine, every human in that flagship knew the stakes. They were not just fighting an alien force, they were fighting for everything they loved. Back at the command center, Blackwell watched the countdown as the charges began to prime. "All units fall back," she ordered. "Get out of there. We don't have much time." The last wave of soldiers scrambled toward the escape pods, with the flagship's internal systems now collapsing under the strain of the bombs. The Zorath flagship was about to be destroyed. The final explosion was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The flagship ruptured in a fiery burst of energy, sending debris spiraling into the void. The Zorath had lost their command ship, and their fleet was thrown into chaos. Ambassador Derek Stone, watching from Earth, knew that this was the moment that would define humanity's future. The Zorath had underestimated them, and now, humanity had delivered its final blow. As Earth's forces regrouped, the surviving Zorath began to retreat. The war wasn't over, but the Zorath had lost their edge. They had underestimated humanity's will to fight back, and now, for the first time in the conflict, Earth had the upper hand. General Blackwell surveyed the battlefield once more, knowing that the final victory would not come in one blow, but in the sheer resilience of humanity's refusal to give up. "We've won this round," she said quietly, "and we'll keep fighting, no matter what it takes." Humanity had proven something fundamental to the universe that day. When pushed to the brink, they would not surrender. The Zorath had learned that the hard way. And now, humanity's final stand would shape the future for generations to come.